The alarm bells rang through station harmony at exactly 6 in the morning, Galactic time. Jake Morrison was drinking his coffee when the sound made him jump. Hot liquid spilled on his uniform as he stood up fast. Around him, other humans from the Earth's delegation were doing the same thing. Katie Brooks ran into the room, her boots making loud sounds on the metal floor. She was breathing hard and her face looked worried. "Commander Morrison, sir? The Galactic Council is calling an emergency. Meeting something bad has happened." Jake put down his coffee cup and grabbed his jacket. Station Harmony was huge. It's bigger than any city on Earth. It floated in space between different solar systems, a place where alien species could meet safely. The humans had only been allowed to join the Galactic Council 6 months ago. They were still new to all of this. As they walked through the long hallways, Jake saw other alien species hurrying to the meeting room too. The Nereidans moved like they were swimming through air, their blue skins shining under the lights. The ethereals floated past them like clouds of gas, changing colors as they moved. The plant-like Verdani walked slowly, their leaves rustling. With each step, the meeting room was massive, with a ceiling so high you could barely see it. Hundreds of different aliens sat in chairs made for their bodies. Some were small like mice, others were tall like trees. Jake had never gotten used to seeing so many different life forms in one place. At the center of the room stood Veltar, the council's main speaker. He looked like a person made of clear crystal, and light moved through their body in pretty patterns. But today the light looked dark and scared. "Members of the Galactic Council, Veltar," began, their voice sounding like wind chimes in a storm. "We have received a distress call from the mining colony on Kepler 4 for 2B. The situation is very bad." A huge screen appeared in the air above them. It showed a planet with green forests and blue oceans. Small cities dotted the land, connected by roads that curved around mountains and rivers. It looked peaceful and beautiful. "The Zephrians who live on this world are farmers and miners," Veltar continued. "They have never hurt anyone. They don't have weapons or soldiers. They only want to live in peace and grow their crops." The image changed to show what looked like giant lizards walking on 2 legs. They wore dark armor and carried weapons that glowed with red light. Their faces had too many teeth, and their eyes were black and cold. "The Krex Empire has invaded their world," Veltar said, and the crystal being's voice became even sadder. "How?" "The Zephrians tried to surrender, but the Krex do not care. They are killing everyone they find." Jake felt his hands turn into fists. Around the room, the other aliens were making sounds of fear and sadness. Some were crying, others were shaking. These were all peaceful species who had never seen real war. "How long do the Zephrians have?" asked a voice from the crowd. Jake turned to see it came from one of the ethereals, their gaseous body now a deep red color. "Our best guess is 72 hours, Veltar replied. "After that, there will be no one left to save." The room became very quiet. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in the silence. Finally, an old Nereidan spoke up. "What can we do? The Krex Empire has 12 big warships and thousands of soldiers. Our peacekeeping forces are not made for real fighting," their aliens began to talk at the same time, their voices mixing together in different languages. The translation machines worked hard to keep up. "We could send a message asking them to stop," suggested a Verdani, their leaves shaking as they spoke. "The Krex don't listen to words," replied another alien. "They only understand violence, and we don't know how to be violent. Maybe we could offer them something they want more than the Zephrian world? What could we give them? They take what they want by force." Jake listened to the aliens talk, and he felt something growing inside his chest. It was anger, but also something else. It was the same feeling he got when he saw bullies picking on smaller kids back in school. The same feeling that made him join the military in the first place. These Krex sounded just like every bully he had ever known. They were strong, so they used that strength to hurt others who couldn't fight back. They thought no one would stop them because no one ever had. Katie leaned over and whispered in his ear. "Sir, they're all scared. Look at them." She was right. Every alien in the room looked terrified. These were species that had evolved on worlds where everything was safe and easy. They had never needed to learn how to fight. Their planets had gentle weather, plenty of food, and no dangerous animals. They had grown up in paradise. Jake thought about Earth. He thought about hurricanes that could destroy entire cities. He thought about earthquakes that could swallow buildings. He thought about volcanoes and tornadoes and floods and droughts. He thought about lions and bears and sharks and snakes. He thought about diseases and famines and ice ages. Earth had tried to kill humans every single day for millions of years. And humans had not just survived, they had learned to fight back. Veltar raised their crystal arms for quiet. "We must face the truth," they said sadly. "There's nothing we can do. We are not warriors. We don't know how to fight wars. The Zephrians will die, and we will add their names to the list of worlds the Krex have destroyed." That's when Jake stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor was loud in the quiet room. Hundreds of alien eyes turned to look at him. "We'll take the mission," Jake said in a clear, strong voice. The room became even more quiet than before. Some aliens looked confused, like they hadn't heard him right. Others looked surprised, their alien faces showing shock in different ways. Veltar's crystal body flashed with bright light. "Commander Morrison, I appreciate your offer. But this is not a job for your species. The Krex Empire is very dangerous. They have destroyed 17 worlds in the past 10 years. Perhaps it would be wise too." "How much time did you say we have?" Jake interrupted.
"Hours."
"But Commander, your people have only been in space for a short time? You don't understand how powerful the Krex are. They have better weapons, bigger ships, more soldiers. This is not like the small conflicts your species might have fought on your homeworld." Jake looked around the room at all the frightened alien faces. These beings were smarter than humans in many ways. They had traveled between stars for thousands of years. They had built amazing cities and incredible machines. But they had one weakness that humans didn't have. They had never learned that sometimes. When someone stronger than you wants to hurt innocent people, the only choice is to fight back, even when you can't win. "Contact Admiral Collins," Jake told. "Katie, tell her to prepare the Endeavor and her escort ships. Tell her we're going to war." The room exploded with noise as aliens began talking all at once. Some sounded worried, others sounded amazed. A few even sounded hopeful. Jake didn't listen to them. He was already thinking about the battle to come. The Krex had never fought humans before. They didn't know that Earth's children had learned to fight not because they wanted to, but because they had to. They didn't know that humans had spent their entire history facing enemies that were bigger, stronger, or more dangerous than they were. The Krex were about to learn something new about the galaxy. They were about to learn what happened when you threatened innocent people in front of a species that came from a world where everything was trying to kill you. And the only way to survive was to become the most dangerous thing of all. They were about to meet the Deathworlders. Admiral Susan Collins was standing on the bridge of the UES Endeavor when Jake Morrison's message came through. The big ship was floating in space near Earth's moon, along with dozens of other human warships. They had been running practice drills when the emergency call arrived. "Ma'am," said Ryan Torres, the communications officer. His voice sounded excited and nervous at the same time. "We just got word from Commander Morrison on Station Harmony. The Galactic Council needs our help. There's a species called the Krex, attacking innocent people." Susan looked out the big window at the front of the bridge. She could see Earth in the distance, a blue and white ball covered in clouds. It looked peaceful from here, but she knew better. That beautiful planet had made humans into fighters, whether they wanted to be or not. "Show me everything we know about these Krex," Susan said. The main screen lit up with information about the enemy. The Krex ships were huge, much bigger than human vessels. Their weapons could punch holes through thick metal armor. Their shields could stop most attacks. On paper, they looked impossible to beat. But Susan had learned a long time ago that paper didn't tell the whole story. She had fought in the Mars colonies when rebel groups tried to take over the mining stations. She had seen human soldiers win battles they should have lost, using nothing but smart thinking and the will to never give up. "Get me Captain Lisa Hamilton on the Wolverine and Captain Steve Parker on the Phoenix," Susan ordered. "We need to talk strategy." Two faces appeared on smaller screens next to the main display. Lisa Hamilton looked calm and ready, her short black hair neat, even after hours of ship drills. Steve Parker was grinning like he always did before a fight, his blue eyes bright with excitement. Ladies and gentlemen, Susan said, we're going to war against an enemy that has better technology and more ships than us. The Galactic Council species think it's hopeless. They're wrong. What makes you so sure, Admiral? Lisa asked. Susan pointed at the data about Krex weapons and ships. Look at this tech. It's amazing, but it was built by a species that never had to innovate under pressure. They never had to fix a broken engine while being shot at. They never had to fight when they were outnumbered and running out of supplies. Steve nodded. They've been winning because they only fight peaceful species. Species that give up when things look bad, exactly. The Krex have never met anyone who fights back harder when things get worse. You're about to get a very unpleasant surprise. Down in the ship's hangar bay, Marine Colonel Alex Murphy was talking to his soldiers. 300 men and women stood in neat rows, all wearing the dark green uniforms of Earth's Space Marines. These were the best fighters humanity had too. Offer Murphy was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of combat. He'd fought in the Amazon jungle wars, the Sahara conflict, and the ice battles in Antarctica. He knew what it meant to face an enemy in the worst places. Earth could offer. Listen up, Marines, Murphy said, his voice echoing in the big metal room. We're going to fight an alien species that thinks they're the toughest things in the galaxy. They call themselves the Krex Empire. They've been bullying peaceful aliens for years because no one could stop them. A young Marine raised her hand. Her name was Maria Gonzalez, and she had grown up in the slums of Mexico City before joining the military. Sir, what about their better weapons and ships? Murphy smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Sergeant Gonzalez, let me tell you something about better technology. The Krex built their weapons and ships on a world where everything was easy. They never had to deal with sandstorms that could strip paint off metal. They never had to fight. In jungles where the plants tried to poison you and the animals tried to eat you, he walked between the rows of Marines, looking each one in the eye. You people have trained in deserts hot enough to cook an egg on a rock. You fought in forests so cold your breath turned to ice. You've learned to survive in places that would kill most aliens in minutes. Another Marine spoke up. This was Tony Williams, a man who had survived 3 tours in the Australian outback conflicts. Sir, are you saying their tech advantage won't matter? I'm saying that fancy weapons don't help if you don't know how to use them when everything goes wrong. Trust me, Marines. We're going to make everything go very wrong for them. Back on the bridge, Susan was studying reports from her intelligence officers. The information about the Krex Empire was not good. They'd conquered world after world, always using the same tactics. They would arrive with overwhelming force, demand surrender, and kill anyone who refused. Admiral Ryan Torres called out, "We're getting messages from the other Galactic Council species. They're worried about us taking this mission." "What kind of worried?" Susan asked. "They think we're going to get ourselves killed. Some of them are asking if we understand how dangerous the Krex are. A few are suggesting we should reconsider." Susan almost laughed. These alien species were so used to peace that they couldn't imagine anyone actually fighting back against bullies. They had lived safe, easy lives for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to stand up to someone stronger than you. "Tell them we appreciate their concern," Susan said. "Also tell them that humans have a saying, we don't start fights, but we finish them." Dr. Amy Rodriguez was working in the medical bay, getting ready for casualties. She had served as a combat medic in the Tibetan mountain wars, where soldiers fought at altitudes that made it hard to breathe. She knew that space battles would bring wounded people. She wanted to be ready. Her medical team was young but experienced. It all worked in Earth's most dangerous places. From the radioactive zones in old Russia to the hurricane-battered islands in the Pacific, they knew how to save lives when everything around them was falling apart. "Doc," said one of her nurses, a woman named Carol Peters, who had grown up in the flooded cities of old Florida, "do you really think we can beat these Krex?" Amy looked up from the medical supplies she was organizing. "Carol, I've patched up soldiers who were fighting in acid rain. I've operated on people while earthquakes shook the building. I've seen humans survive things that should have killed them 10 times over." She pointed toward the ceiling in the direction where the enemy waited. "These Krex have never dealt with a species that considers surviving on their home planet too. Be basic training. They're about to learn why you don't mess with Earth's children." Meanwhile, in the ship's engine room, Chief Engineer Dan Foster, was making sure everything was working perfectly. The Endeavor's engines were a mix of human engineering, an alien technology that Earth had traded for. But Dan had modified them with his own improvements. Dan had learned his trade working on oil rigs in the North Sea, where storms could destroy a platform in minutes if the engines failed. He had fixed machines while standing in water up to his waist, with wind trying to blow him off the rig. "Chief," said his assistant, a young woman named Beth Moore, "are you sure these modifications will work? The alien tech wasn't designed for this kind of stress." Don wiped grease off his hands with a dirty rag. "Beth, alien technology is impressive, but it was built by species that never had to deal with real emergencies. They never had to fix a critical system while their world was trying to kill them." He patted the side of the big engine. "This beauty has been modified by someone who learned engineering in the worst conditions Earth could offer, a Krexer. Going to be very surprised when we do things their computers say are impossible." Throughout the ship, similar conversations were happening. Human soldiers, sailors, pilots, and support staff were all preparing for battle against an enemy that looked unbeatable. But none of them seemed worried. They had grown up on a world where hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, and ice ages were just part of life. They had learned to fight animals with claws and teeth, diseases that could kill in days. And whether that changed from deadly heat to deadly cold without warning, the Krex Empire was about to discover something that the peaceful, Galactic Council species had never learned. Sometimes when you face a bully, the only language they understand is force. And humans had been speaking that language since the first caveman picked up a rock to defend his family. Admiral Lux looked out at the stars and smiled. The Krex thought they were the apex predators of the galaxy. They're about to meet the children of Earth and learn what real predators looked like. The human fleet came out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system like sharks emerging from dark water. Admiral Susan Collins stood on the bridge of the Endeavor watching the enemy ships appear on her screens. 12 massive Krex battle cruisers hung in space around the beautiful green planet, their dark hulls scarred from many conquests. "There they are," said Ben Carter, the tactical officer. His voice was steady, but Susan could see his hands gripping his console tightly. 12 ships, just like intelligence said. Each one is twice the size of our biggest vessel. Susan studied the enemy formation on the main screen. The Krex had arranged their ships in a pattern she recognized from old military textbooks. It was designed to look scary and make enemies surrender before the fighting even started. It had probably worked perfectly against every peaceful species they had faced. "They're trying to intimidate us," Susan said calmly. "Standard bully tactics. Make yourself look bigger and meaner, so the other guy runs away." Captain Lisa Hamilton's voice came through the communications system from the Wolverine. "Admiral, I'm seeing weapon signatures that match our intelligence reports. Those ships pack enough firepower to level a city." "Copy that, Lisa." "Steve, what's your status, Captain?" Steve Parker answered from the Phoenix. "All systems green, Admiral. My crew's ready to show these reptiles what happens when you pick on innocent people." Susan nodded. Her fleet was smaller and less powerful than the enemy force, but she had something the Krex didn't expect. She had humans who had learned to fight on a world where everything tried to kill them, who had survived by being smarter and more stubborn than anything they faced. Admiral Ryan Torres called from the communications station. "We're getting a transmission from the Krex flagship." "Put it on screen," Susan ordered. The main display flickered and showed the inside of an alien ship. Standing in the center was the biggest, most terrifying creature Susan had ever seen. War Chief Slack of the Krex Empire was 7 feet tall and covered in dark green scales that looked like armor. His eyes were black holes in his skull. His mouth was full of teeth sharp enough to tear metal. Behind him, Susan could see something that made her blood run cold. Bodies hung from hooks on the wall. They were Zephrians, the peaceful plant-like people who had lived on this world. Some were still moving weakly. "Unknown vessels," Slack spoke, and his voice sounded like rocks, grinding together. The translation computer made his words understandable, but they still sounded like a threat. "You have 30 seconds to leave this system before we add your ships to our collection. Add the plant creatures belong to us now. We will do with them as we please." Several crew members on the bridge made angry sounds. Susan could feel the rage building in her chest, but she kept her face calm and professional. She had learned long ago that the best way to deal with bullies was to not let them see they had scared you. Susan stepped forward so the alien could see her clearly. War Chief Slack, I am Admiral Susan Collins of the Earth Defense Force. You have broken Galactic Council law by attacking a peaceful colony. Surrender now, and you will be treated fairly, according to space law. Slack's laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. His black eyes looked at Susan like she was something small and stupid. Earth, I have never heard of this species. Must be new to traveling between stars, little mammal. Let me teach you how the galaxy really works. The alien moved closer to his camera, and Susan could see old scars on his face from many battles. We are the Krex Empire. We have conquered 17 worlds. We have destroyed fleets 3 times larger than yours. You're the apex predators of space, and you are just another meal. Behind Slack, one of the hanging Zephrians tried to speak. The peaceful alien was badly hurt, but it managed to whisper something that sounded like a plea for help. Slack turned and struck the creature with his clawed hand, making it go silent. Watch carefully, Earth creatures, Slack said, turning back to face Susan. See what happens to those who oppose us? Soon your bodies will hang next to theirs. Duh. Transmission ended, and the bridge became very quiet. Susan could hear her crew breathing heavily. Some of them looked angry, others looked scared. All of them looked ready to fight. All ships. This is Collins, Susan announced over the fleet communications. You all saw what we're dealing with. These are not honorable warriors. They're bullies who hurt innocent people because they can. They think we're just another peaceful species that will run away when things get dangerous. She paused, looking around at her crew. These were humans who had survived Earth's worst disasters, who had fought in wars that would have destroyed weaker species. They had been shaped by a world that never gave up trying to kill them, and they had learned to never give up either. Have no idea what humans are capable of, Susan continued. They've never fought a species that considers violence to be just another problem to solve. They've never faced people who get more determined when the odds get worse. Captain Hamilton's voice crackled over the comm. Admiral, should we try to negotiate? Maybe we can minimize the casualties. Negative, Lisa. These creatures have been terrorizing peaceful species for years, while the Galactic Council watched helplessly. Today, they learn why you don't mess with Earth's children. Susan turned to Ben Carter. All weapons free. Show them what humans think about bullies. The Krex ships began moving into attack formation. Their shields powered up with flashes of blue light. Their weapons started glowing red as they charged up for battle. War Chief Slack was probably expecting the human ships to turn around and run, like every other species had done. Instead, the human fleet spread out into a formation that no Galactic Council species had ever used. It looked almost random, like the ships were scattered by accident. Krex computers probably couldn't understand what the humans were trying to do. That was exactly what Susan wanted. Ben, target their communication arrays first, Susan ordered. I want them deaf and blind when we start this dance. Aye, Admiral. Targeting systems locked on. On the enemy flagship, War Chief Slack was watching the human ships with growing confusion. These creatures weren't following any known tactical pattern. They weren't forming defensive lines or trying to retreat. They were moving in a way that made no sense. War Chief, said his tactical officer, a smaller Krex with nervous eyes. The alien ships are not following standard combat doctrine. Computers cannot predict their next moves. Slack growled deep in his throat. It doesn't matter. They are small and weak. We will crush them like we crushed all the others. It's all ships. Prepare to fire. But as the Krex weapons charged up, something happened that Slack had never seen before. The human ships didn't try to protect themselves with shields or armor. Instead, they started moving faster, diving, and spinning through space like they were dancing. The first Krex volley fired, sending beams of deadly energy toward the human fleet. But the humans weren't where the targeting computers said they should be. They had moved in ways that shouldn't have been possible, avoiding attacks that should have destroyed them. Impossible, Slack whispered. No species moves like that in space combat. On the Endeavor's bridge, Susan smiled grimly. The Krex had made their first mistake. They had assumed that space combat followed rules, that ships moved in predictable patterns that computers could calculate. But humans had learned to fight in Earth's atmosphere, where weather and gravity and 100 other factors could change everything in an instant. He had learned that sometimes the best way to survive was to do something so crazy that your enemy couldn't predict it. Now, Susan said quietly, the human ships opened fire. The space around Kepler 442 exploded into chaos as the human fleet opened fire. What happened next would be remembered in galactic history as the day everything changed. The Krex Empire had built their reputation on crushing peaceful species who had no idea how to fight real wars. They had never faced an enemy that treated violence not as something terrible, but as just another problem to solve. The U's Phoenix, under Captain Steve Parker, moved like nothing the Krex had ever seen. The ship dove beneath the enemy formation, spinning through their attack pattern like a leaf in a hurricane. Krex weapons fired where the Phoenix should have been, but the human ship was already somewhere else. Target their engine clusters, Steve ordered his weapons officer, a young man named Carl Davis, who had grown up hunting in the Rocky Mountains. I want those big ships limping, not flying. Carl's fingers danced over his controls with the same steady hands he had used to shoot deer from a mile away. The Phoenix's weapons lanced out, not trying to destroy the enemy ships completely, but hitting them in exactly the right spots to cripple them. The first Krex battlecruiser shuddered as its main engines exploded. The massive ship began to drift helplessly, no longer able to maneuver. Its weapons could still fire, but it couldn't chase the fast-moving human vessels. One down, Steve said with a grin. 11 to go. Meanwhile, Captain Lisa Hamilton aboard the Wolverine was showing the Krex something they had never experienced before: human tactical thinking. While the enemy ships focused on the Phoenix's wild attack run, the Wolverine had quietly moved around to their rear. "Ma'am," said her tactical officer, a woman named Janet Moore, who had served in the submarine wars under Earth's polar ice caps. "We're behind their formation. They don't even know we're here." Lisa nodded. Submarine warfare had taught humans how to be patient, how to move without being seen, how to strike from unexpected directions. The Krex fought like they were in a boxing match, standing face to face and throwing punches. Humans fought like they were hunting, using every advantage they could find. "Fire," Lisa ordered. The Wolverine's weapons struck 3 Krex ships from behind, hitting them in their weak spots. The aliens had designed their ships to fight enemies who attacked from the front, not from behind. 2 of the battlecruisers lost their shield generators. The third one started spinning out of control as its navigation systems failed. But it was Admiral Susan Collins aboard the Endeavor who truly showed the difference between how peaceful species fought and how humans fought. As the Krex flagship concentrated all its fire on her vessel, Susan didn't try to retreat or hide behind her shields. Instead, she ordered her ship to fly straight toward the enemy. "Admiral," it called Pete Williams, the navigation officer. "Collision. Course in 90 seconds. If we don't change direction, we're going to crash right into them." "Steady as she goes, Pete," Susan replied calmly. She turned to Ben Carter at the weapons station. "Ben, prepare the boarding pods. Colonel Murphy, get your Marines ready for a combat drop." War Chief Slack watched from his flagship as the human ship flew directly at him. No sane species would try to board an enemy vessel in the middle of a space battle. It was tactically crazy, strategically impossible. It's completely illogical, which was exactly why it worked. The Krex had never fought an enemy that did impossible things. They had conquered 17 worlds by following the same plan every time: arrive with superior force, demand surrender, destroy anyone who refused. It had worked perfectly against species who fought fair, who followed rules, who tried to minimize casualties. Humans didn't fight fair. They fought to win, at the last possible second. The Endeavor's engines fired in reverse, bringing the massive ship alongside the Krex flagship in a maneuver that should have been impossible. The human ship had been moving so fast that stopping next to the enemy required precision that the Krex computer said was beyond any pilot's ability. But Pete Williams had learned to fly in Earth's atmosphere, where sudden storms could change wind direction in seconds. He had practiced emergency landings on aircraft carriers that moved up and down with ocean waves. He knew how to make a ship do things that computers said were impossible. Magnetic grapples fired from the Endeavor. Locking the two ships together, boarding pods launched directly into the Krex hull, cutting through their armor like bullets through paper. Colonel Alex Murphy led the first wave of Marines into the enemy ship. The Krex warriors waiting inside thought they knew what they were facing. They had fought other species before, creatures who were bigger or stronger than humans. They expected another simple victory. Instead, they met something that would give them nightmares for the rest of their lives. The Marines moved through the alien ship like they had trained for this their entire lives. Because in a way, they had. Every human soldier had grown up on a world where survival meant being ready for anything. They had learned to fight in jungles where every plant was poisonous, deserts where the sun could kill you, in Arctic wastes where a broken heater meant death. Sergeant Maria Gonzalez kicked down a door and found herself face to face with a Krex warrior twice her size. The alien had claws that could cut through steel and muscles that could crush bones. But Maria had grown up in the slums of Mexico City, where gangs fought with knives and broken bottles. She knew that size didn't always win fights. The Krex warrior swung his massive claws at her head. Maria ducked under the attack and drove her combat knife into the alien's knee joint. As the creature fell, she hit it with a stun weapon that would have dropped a rhinoceros. "Room clear," she reported calmly, like she had just finished cleaning her quarters instead of defeating a monster that had terrorized half the galaxy, all through the Krex ship. Similar scenes were playing out. Human Marines faced alien warriors, who were bigger, stronger, and more heavily armed. And the humans won every single time. It wasn't because humans were better fighters than the Krex. It was because humans had learned to fight differently. The Krex had evolved as the top predators on their world. They had never needed to be clever or creative. They just used their strength to win. Humans had evolved as prey animals who became predators through intelligence and cooperation. They had learned to hunt creatures much larger than themselves by working together and using tools. They had survived ice ages and volcanic winters by adapting when stronger species died out. Within 30 minutes, Colonel Murphy's Marines had seized control of the Krex flagship's bridge. War Chief Slack found himself staring down the barrel of a human weapon, his claws useless against enemies who fought from a distance with perfect coordination. "Surrender," Murphy told the alien commander. His voice was calm and professional, like he was asking someone to pass the salt. "Order your remaining ships to stand down, and no one else has to get hurt." Slack looked around at his bridge crew, all of them captured or unconscious. He had spent his entire life believing that the Krex were the ultimate warriors in the galaxy. Now he was being defeated by creatures half his size who had appeared from nowhere. "You are just mammals," Slack said, but his voice shook with uncertainty. "Small, weak mammals. How is this possible?" Murphy smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "We're mammals from a world that spent 4 billion years trying to kill us. We learned that the only way to survive was to become more dangerous than everything else." While Murphy was accepting the Krex surrender, the rest of the human fleet was finishing their work. Captain Parker had disabled 3 more enemy ships. Captain Hamilton had captured 2 others by boarding them while their crews were distracted by the main battle. In less than 2 hours, the human fleet had defeated an enemy force twice their size with better technology and more weapons. They had done it not by being stronger or having better ships, but by fighting in ways the Krex couldn't understand or predict. Admiral Collins stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, looking at the tactical display that showed 12 Krex battlecruisers, all of them either captured, disabled, or surrendering. Her small human fleet hadn't lost a single ship. Admiral Ryan Torres reported from the communications station. "All Krex vessels are requesting terms of surrender. War Chief Slack is asking to speak with you personally." Susan nodded. The battle was over, but the real work was just beginning. The galaxy was about to learn that humans didn't just fight to win battles. They fought to make sure that bullies never hurt innocent people again. The rescue of the Zephrian colonists began immediately after the Krex surrender. Human medical ships landed on the planet's surface while Marine teams secured the prison camps where the peaceful aliens had been held. Dr. Amy Rodriguez worked alongside her medical team to treat injuries that made even experienced combat medics feel sick. The Zephrians were tall, thin creatures that looked like walking trees with gentle faces and large, kind eyes. Many of them had been hurt badly by their Krex captors. Some were missing limbs that the aliens had cut off for fun. Others had burns from Krex weapons that were meant to cause pain, not kill quickly. "Doctor," said Carol Peters, the nurse who had grown up in Florida's flooded cities. Her voice was shaking as she looked at a young Zephrian whose arm had been torn off. How could anyone do this to creatures that never hurt anybody? Amy worked carefully to stop the aliens' bleeding, while human engineers nearby set up a temporary hospital, because bullies always pick on people who can't fight back. Carol, that's what makes them bullies instead of warriors. The Zephrian child looked up at Amy with eyes full of fear and pain. Through the translation device, it whispered, "Are you here to hurt us too?" Amy felt tears in her eyes, but she kept working. "No, little one. We're here to help. The bad people can't hurt you anymore." Commander Jake Morrison stood in the main square of the largest Zephrian city, watching human soldiers help rebuild what the Krex had destroyed. The aliens had burned down schools and hospitals for no reason except cruelty. They had poisoned water supplies and destroyed food stores, trying to make the peaceful colonists suffer as much as possible before they died. Veltar, the crystal being from the Galactic Council, appeared next to Jake in a flash of light. They had traveled here. As soon as news of the human victory reached Station Harmony, their crystalline form was bright with amazement and something that looked like shame. "Commander Morrison," Veltar said, their voice sounding like surprised wind chimes, "we owe your species more than an apology. We thought that because humans were new to space travel, you would be inexperienced in matters of war." Jake looked up from a report about the rescue operations. In just 6 hours, human teams had freed over 10,000 Zephrian prisoners and begun treating their injuries. Human engineers were already working to repair the damage the Krex had done to the planet's infrastructure. "It's understandable," Jake replied. "Your species evolved on worlds that took care of them. Ours spent millions of years trying to kill us every single day. That changes how you look at problems." Admiral Susan Collins joined them, still wearing her battle-worn uniform. Behind her walked Warchief Slack in chains, guarded by 2 human Marines. The once proud Krex commander looked smaller now, his scales dull and his black eyes filled with something he had never felt before: fear. "The Krex Empire has agreed to immediate surrender and reparations for all their previous conquests," Susan announced. "They will return every stolen resource, free every slave, and rebuild every world they destroyed." Veltar's crystalline form shimmered with amazement. "In all our recorded history, no species has achieved such a complete victory against forces with superior numbers and technology. How is this possible?" Susan and Jake exchanged a look. How could they explain that humanity's greatest strength came from their world's greatest challenge? How could peaceful species understand that Earth hadn't just created survivors, but had forged a species that got stronger under pressure? "Our planet taught us that the universe doesn't care about fairness," Susan said finally. "So we learned to make our own fairness. The Krex terrorized peaceful species because they could. Today, they learned that there are consequences to that behavior." Warchief Slack spoke for the first time since his capture. His voice was quiet and broken, nothing like the proud roar he had used when threatening the humans. "We studied your species before the battle. Your technology is primitive. Your ships are small. Your weapons are weak. We should have won easily." Jake looked down at the defeated alien commander. "You studied our technology, but you didn't study us. You didn't understand what kind of creatures you were fighting." "We are apex predators," Slack said, but his voice lacked conviction. We have conquered 17 worlds. We've never been defeated. You were apex predators on your world, Susan corrected. But your world was easy. Plenty of food, stable weather, no natural disasters. You never had to adapt or innovate. You just used your strength to take what you wanted. Colonel Murphy approached the group, his Marines having finished securing the area. Admiral, we've completed our sweep of the planet. All Krex forces have been captured or have surrendered. Zephrians are safe. As news of the battle spread throughout the galaxy, something remarkable began to happen. Species that had been terrorized by the Krex for years started to contact the Galactic Council, asking about these humans who had done the impossible. The aquatic Nereidans who lived in vast underwater cities sent a message asking if humans could help them deal with pirates who had been raiding their shipping lanes. The ethereal gas clouds wanted to know if Earth would consider establishing a defense pact. Even the plant-like Verdani, who had never shown interest in anything violent, were curious about human military tactics. But it was the arrival of a small, damaged ship 3 days later that really showed how much things had changed. The vessel belonged to a species called the Melody, tiny bird-like creatures who were even more peaceful than the Zephrians. They had been fleeing from another group of Krex. Raiders, when they heard about the human victory, the Melody ambassador was no bigger than a human child with bright blue feathers and large, frightened eyes. She spoke in a voice like singing birds, even through the translation system. Please, she said to Jake Morrison as he met her in the Endeavor's docking bay.
Our world is 3 days from here. The Krex came 2 weeks ago. They are taking our
children for slaves and killing our elders for sport. We have nowhere else to go. Jake looked down at the small, terrified creature and felt the same anger he had felt when he first learned about the attack on the Zephrians. Throughout human history, whenever innocent people were threatened by bullies, there had always been someone willing to stand up and fight back. Don't worry, Jake, told the Melody ambassador. We'll help you to rescue the Melody homeworld. It took only 18 hours. The Krex raiders there surrendered as soon as they saw human ships approaching. Word of War Chief Slack's defeat had spread quickly through their empire, and none of them wanted to face the terrifying Deathworlders in battle. Within a month, the term Deathworlder had spread throughout the galaxy. Whispered it with fear, imagining humans as violent monsters who solved every problem with war. But as they watched human rescue teams save alien civilians, human doctors treat alien diseases, and human engineers rebuild destroyed worlds, the fear began to change into something else. Respect the Galactic Council held a special meeting to formally thank humanity for their service. Representatives from dozens of species attended, many of them offering trade agreements, defense pacts, and cultural exchanges. For the first time in galactic history, the peaceful species felt truly safe. Veltar stood before the assembled aliens, their crystal form glowing brighter than anyone had ever seen. We have learned something important about the nature of peace, they announced. Peace is not simply the absence of violence. True peace requires those who are willing to fight for it. They turned toward the human delegation, where Jake Morrison sat with Admiral Collins and the other Earth representatives. The humans have shown us that sometimes when faced with evil, the most peaceful thing you can do is stop it. Jake stood up to address the assembly. Around him, hundreds of alien eyes watched with curiosity and gratitude. These were species that had lived in fear for too long, always hoping that bullies would leave them alone if they didn't fight back. We didn't ask to become the galaxy's protectors, Jake said. We just did what anyone should do when innocent. People are threatened. We stood up to the bullies. He looked around the chamber at all the different species, all the unique life forms that had found ways to live together in peace. Earth taught us that survival isn't about being the strongest or having the best weapons. It's about never giving up, even when everything seems hopeless. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. As the meeting ended and the various species began to leave, many of them approached the human representatives with requests for help, offers of friendship, and expressions of gratitude. The galaxy had found its protectors in the most unlikely place, a small blue world on the edge of known space, whose people had been forged in the fires of a planet that tried to kill them every day. The aliens hadn't known who would come when they sent their distress call into the void. They had expected another gentle species, another group that would express sympathy but prove unable to act. Instead, they had summoned the children of Earth, and Earth, as it always had, answered with determination and courage, with the unshakable belief that some things were worth fighting for. No matter the odds, the Deathworlders had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same.